Okay, fantastic. So thank you everybody for attending today's webinar in preparation for the Smart Sensing CRC in Australian Resilience that we're exploring at the moment as an opportunity. So my name is Laura Earle. I am from the New South Wales Smart Sensing Network, and I'm joined here today by Sergio Leon Saval, who will be running our panel. So welcome to the Australian Resilience Sensing Technologies think tank, presented by the NSSN and the University of Sydney. So just a reminder that this session is being recorded. The New South Wales Smart Sensing Network is one of the chief scientists and engineers innovation networks in New South Wales. And we were created in 2017 as a way to foster collaboration and opportunity for New South Wales and ACT University R&D, and bringing that capability in sensing to industry and government to solve the problems that they are having, and where sensing technologies could, be a crucial factor in solutions or in improvement in the process. So we broker relationships between these groups, and that's why we're here today, because as I mentioned, we're exploring the Smart Sensing CRC for Australian Resilience. And so we're wanting to bring together our 9-member universities, other universities and research institutions around Australia, and also our industry partners into this process. So I'd like to welcome you from the NSSN and hand over, acknowledge the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, where I am currently located. Acknowledging and celebrating the first Australians on the traditional lands where we are meeting, and wherever you are coming from, and pay our respects to their elders past, present and emerging. And we extend that respect to any Indigenous or Torres Strait Islanders that are here with us today. I'd now like to pass on to my colleague, Sergio Leon Saval from the University of Sydney.
Hi, welcome. I'm going to try to keep it short because important people are the ones that you can see here on the faces on the panel. But first, what I would like to actually is to give a brief intro of what the CRC is. I think that we all know what it is, but just a good reminder of what is the purpose and the mission of it. So, and probably the most important part is actually that what that brings to the industry. And I'm not going to read the text of what the CRC is. I just wanted to remind there. But the important part is how it's important to have the stakeholders joining from very early on. Just a reminder that we're actually aiming for a 2026 round here. So we're trying to do things with time for once. And basically the plan is what is the value proposition for industry here, right? And it's a one-on-one cash matching to be able to establish and shape the R&D projects between the stakeholders, the users, the actors and effectors, right? And then to be able to continually adapt that project towards sustainable goals of the industry partners and the end users. So they will bring opportunities for IP, and also will be a cost-effective way of doing R&D in the current economic situation that is from industry and the government. So that's the main goal of the CRC. And now, Laura, can you put the next slide, please? Yep. Basically, what is the actual overarching framework that we're looking at here, and what we like to call our vision, is to be able to be the industry-led national leader in smart sensing, resilient, and accelerate sovereign capabilities for national security and natural hazards. And that's the point of today's webinar. So if you look at how we join those two in principle quite distinct areas, it is clear that threats are actually is an increasing factor within Australia due to the geographical condition of Australia, imminent economic and political changes to the Indo-Pacific. But one thing that came to our attention is the concept of being able to help in those two different areas by smart sensing, okay, and in a more precise way by bringing together the fact of dual use composite technology into this framework in the sense that we could actually be using sensor fusion, smart technologies, data analytics in a sense in which we can actually benefit both national security and natural hazards. So basically to cover what we like to call Australian resilience. So in a nutshell, that's what we have, what we are aiming for. And this webinar in particular is one of the key steps that we're taking to be able to shape this idea between all of us and to actually bring this on the table with a more cohesive, concrete goals and aims. So now I think I'm going to move forward to the real important and interesting thing today, which is our guest panelists here. And basically, I would like to actually start throwing around the mic, as they say, on the MC wall. And I would like to start for you introducing yourself briefly. And I'm going to give you the cue. For example, Deb, can you start introducing yourself?
I really hoped I wasn't going to have to go first, but anyway, I'm Deb Sparks from AFAC. For those that don't know, AFAC is the National Council for Fire and Emergency Service Authorities. So we facilitate collaboration between all the fire services, land management agencies, SES, just to amplify their voices and help them unify and potentially use national products to help them do their business.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. Oscar?
Thanks, Sergio. So my name's Oscar Leslie. I'm the Director of Research at FASE. We're a specialist defence and national security venture studio and advisory firm, and our primary focus is on enabling the translation of government requirements, whether they be from the national security community or the defence community, academic research and industry technologies to combine and sort of actually form a cohesive capability that then winds up in the hands of the end user. In that role, we work with sort of everyone from the startup side through to sort of the primes on the industry space and most Australian universities. And on the defence side and national security side, we really try to work with operational end users as much as possible to actually understand sort of how is it that we distill down the priorities into what actually makes a difference for people on the ground.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. I can see Christopher here is joining us on my screen.
No, I don't think so,
no,
Sergio.
Okay. So Mark, can you go first, please? Mark Bishop, Ocular. Oh, Mark was with us just 2 minutes ago. Okay, so Sarah from Safran.
Hi, so I'm Sarah Sharp. So my background is I did do a PhD quite a few years ago now in quantum physics. Actually was working on diamond and silicon at that time. I've worked across worked with a lot of companies on commercialization of quite disruptive technologies, advanced manufacturing and advanced technologies. Very strong theme of detector sensing through a lot of that, a lot of nanofabrication, semiconductor work as well. I have worked across a number of industries. I started off with Oxford Instruments, and obviously we provide nano analysis solutions to a number of different industries. And more recently, I've been much more focused on defence. So my last role was at Thales. I headed up their integrated sensors and effectors, technology and engineering. And currently I'm chief engineer for Safran, particularly for their sensing products that are supported here in Australia. I do also do other work as well, supporting startups, particularly around quantum technologies, new quantum technologies.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Sarah. Mark, I think I saw you briefly. You appeared and disappeared. Can you please introduce yourself?
There we go. Okay, so yes, Ocular Robotics is an SME. We specialize in the rapid directing of dense data points, so rapid redirecting of those, typically pixels or whatever other data points in the sensing space. As an example, redirecting between 10 different targets per second to be able to resolve a drone at 3.5 kilometers and longer. And so that sort of rapid redirecting of sensing of very dense data points.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. Philip, would you mind introducing yourself, please?
Good afternoon, everyone. Philip O from Hawkesbury City Council. I'm the Resilience and Emergency Management Coordinator for the Hawkesbury LGA. Just a short background on myself, 30 years with the New South Wales Rural Fire Service, 20 years as a staff member and visiting many fires across New South Wales and across the country. 2 years with New South Wales Police as a Regional Emergency Management Coordinator and currently, as I said, with Hawkesbury City Council. And with discussions with Laura, just to join the panel today and this group of people that I feel far out of my depth with, just to bring to the table some of the experiences we had, especially with the floods last year and that use of technology and hopefully some insights on where we can improve things from where we are now.
That's great, Philip. That's exactly what we're here for. Fantastic. So, David? I think you're muted, David.
Sorry. Thanks for the opportunity to join today. My name is David Brewster. I'm with the National Security College in Canberra, where I work on regional engagement, and much of my current work relates to maritime domain awareness, consulting with DFAT, Defence and various partner countries around the region. Much of that involves a focus on satellite sensing of the maritime domain. Thanks.
Great, thank you very much, David. So now we got Nick Fitzgerald from the DSTG.
Thank you, Sergio. Nick Fitzgerald here from Defence Science and Technology Group, or DST Group. For those of you that aren't aware, DSTG is the Australian Government's lead agency for applying science and technology to safeguard Australia and its national interests. Now, the area where I particularly come from is a large-scale program called Operating in Chemical, Biological, Radiological and Nuclear Environments, Starshot, our play on Moonshot. And my aim is to shift the paradigm from surviving the surprise of a chemical or biological incident to surviving the surprise and continuing to operate. And you'll find out hopefully later that surprisingly there's a lot of overlap in that space when compared to smart sensings for national resilience. I've also got a colleague here today, Dr. Justin Fidock, and maybe I'll pass on to him as a colleague at DST Group.
Yes, please. Thank you.
Yeah, good afternoon, everyone, and thanks, Nick, for the intro. Yeah, so I'm the Program Leader for National Security within Cyber Intelligence and National Security Division within DSTG. And part of our remit as a division is similar to Nick, is to programmatically seek to pull together priority innovation, science and technology responses to the sort of challenges we've got within that domain. My particular purview is national security, and the role I have is to both work with domestic and international partners to identify areas of common interest, and secondly, to identify ways in which we might co-invest and mobilise in ways that are a bit more focused and deliver more impact. And our most recent effort in that regard is around protective security, one element of which potentially is quite relevant for this particular forum, around understanding where sensor technology is going to go and the opportunity as well as challenge that presents for protective security, both within government but also for critical infrastructure. Thanks.
That's great. Thank you, Justin. So that's exactly it. What are the challenges and the opportunities? That's what we're trying to get a better flavor today. And what an amazing panel we have here. I mean, it's quite eclectic, and that's the whole point of this actually exercise, which we are into different areas, and then we will realize that probably they're not that different in the needs and the unmet solutions that we need for Australia. So let me start with starting the ball rolling here. And what I would like to start is probably with Deb and Philip to actually talk about in the recent threats and hazards that you guys have encountered. You just mentioned briefly a couple of them before. What happened in the terms of access, communications, outcomes? What would be that type of missing step that you, in hindsight, would have said before? Okay, we would have done much better if we had this and that. So, is any learning experience from that moments of emergency?
I might kick off if that's okay, Philip.
Yeah, perfect. Yeah, thank you.
So
I was hoping you would.
I was thinking about this, and I can't really pinpoint one exact event where I can outline those what you were talking about, the communications and outcomes. But and I'll also start by saying I am not a tech person at all. So if you want to talk sensitivities and their capabilities, it'll probably just go over my head. But I can just give you some broad statements about requirements from the emergency services sector about our smart sensing requirements. So basically what we need is fast and effective ways to understand, first of all, what the risk is. So that might be like understanding where housing might be impacted by floods. It might be understanding what the current bushfire fuel conditions are. That's a real challenge for us. It usually requires people going out and taking measurements on the ground. So if there's any way of smart sensing what those current conditions are, that will help to inform risk reduction activities that we can undertake as well. Then obviously during the event, we need real-time information about how the event is unfolding. So it might be flood extent or where the fire line is. And then obviously focusing relief and recovery activities. So understanding where the greatest impact is so that we can then allocate the resources to where they're required. I guess in terms, I think there was one question about communication, and so I just want to give a small example, and that was the Cyclone Gabrielle in New Zealand. So Hawke's Bay got cut off by road, rail, electricity, water, phone. So that was a real challenge for people on the ground there to understand what was going on the ground, and then also communicating. And I know sensing's not really communicating, but it's kind of linked because it's all satellite up there in the air somewhere. So so that's kind of a bit of a broad statement of some of the needs of the sector in terms of smart sensing.
Mm-hmm. No, that's great. Actually, I mean, just one point there on your comment is here this CRC center is not only about the tech. It's actually about how we implement that smart sensing, that communications between sensors, communication to the stakeholders. So it's all including that. So you're right on the spot when communications was one of the main issues that have happened and recurring in some of the workshops that we have going through. So Philip, you want to add something to that?
Yes, certainly. Thanks, Deb. Looking at the Hawkesbury is such a diverse LGA. We have small cities, we have townships, and we have areas such as the Lower Macdonald Valley, which includes St Albans, which is classified as part of Greater Sydney. But realistically, the communication capability in that area is third world. mobile phone signals, things like that, are just non-existent. My concern, I suppose, with a lot of things these days is that our emergency service partners are relying on the capability of mobile communications data capability to get warnings and things like that out to communities, out to residents, but we fail in that area because as soon as there is a fire or a flood, power lines are cut, power's cut to telecommunication sites, therefore telecommunications in regards to warning systems and things like that fall over. If we're going to bring data and sensors into the mix to forecast or present real-time information, how are we going to get that information to the decision makers if our communications platforms are falling over all over the place? Now, I do believe some of the telcos are looking at using cellular broadcasting shortly and bringing the satellites down to a certain level and being able to use that technology to replace the need for mobile towers. But right now, that's what we've got. We've used a lot of agencies, especially with the floods, Defence, SES, RFS, Fire and Rescue New South Wales with their drones, their capabilities, their aircraft. The issue is that information has a delay in coming back to the decision makers. So when we're looking for real-time information on floods or real-time information on fires, by the time it actually gets back to the Emergency Operations Centre or the Incident Management Team at Fire Control Centres, there's a delay in that information. If you're looking at a fire situation, that half an hour or 15 minutes even is a massive difference to where the fire is then to where it is now and what it's impacting.
Okay.
With sensing, I do believe from my time I spent in Victoria, they have an emergency management COP program or system, which is the Common Operating Picture, which actually has sensor data in it. And it gives the opportunity for the decision makers, especially in fire situations, to make critical decisions on deploying resources to protect infrastructure. From memory, there's a power line that runs from New South Wales down into Melbourne as part of their main power supply, which actually has sensors around it that would report fire travelling towards that heavily critical infrastructure, which is then reported back to people that they can make critical information. That is not common in New South Wales and in Queensland and in other states. So one of the things that would be nice to see is the development using technology and all the information that we have at our hands and our fingertips to develop a common operating picture that's consistent across the country and feeds information in real life or as close to real life time for the decision makers to have that capability to make the right decisions. And those right decisions that they're going to make is around the safety of the people that they're looking after. And then if you look at what happened in the 2019 fire situation in New South Wales, sites and things like that were knocked over by the fire, which then reduced the ability for information to get out. So if we had some kind of system around the place that could tell the decision makers that this is what's happening, you need to take some action now, may help that situation.
That's great actually. So that actually resonates probably quite a lot with the other area topic that we are going to be discussing today. So based
if
on
I
that,
could
I
just
would
say,
like...
sorry, Sergio, if I could just say one more thing.
Go ahead.
Working with all the different agencies, they have some fantastic tools and have some fantastic capability, but it's isolated. Rural Fire Service has technology on their aircraft that they're able to do certain things, but that may not necessarily be lent across to SES in looking, with floods. Defence personnel and Defence have a great capability as well, but it's isolated to themselves. It's how do we combine all this stuff and use it collectively as well? And I'll get off my soapbox for a bit now. Thank
No,
you.
that's great. That's great. You're spot on there. I mean, one of the things that we're discussing here is the dual use and composite, but not only technology, but dual use and composite platforms for the sharing data and interpreting data and giving data to actors and effectors. And so that's actually a extremely good point there. So I would like to actually move a little bit to the other side of the panel, in the sense of to give a little bit of view on what the defense and national intelligence current geopolitical, regional and geographical environment, and how that resonates with the need for a resilient Australia in the area of sensor fusion, the smart sensing, deployment of that type of dual use technology. If any would like to actually take that, Justin, Nick, or Oscar, any of you will take that?
Sure, I can make a few comments, but I noticed that David put his hand up, so maybe Dave, you want to
Yeah,
go first?
Deb wants to
I
add
know
something.
it was Deb. So
Oh,
yeah,
Hi, Deb.
I guess I just wanted to make a point, and Arno put something up in the chat about the imbalance between funding for defence and volunteer-based organisations. And I just want everyone to keep in mind that when we're talking about defence, we're talking about a Commonwealth-run program, and when we're talking about resilience, we're talking about community-run and jurisdiction-run. So there is a big difference in how that approach works. And so if you want a unified approach across natural disaster resilience, you've got to bring 8 jurisdictions along with you. So just wanted you to keep that little snippet of information in the back of your mind. And Philip sort of alluded to it as well, like Victoria's got a COP. New South Wales are getting a COP, but there are other jurisdictions that don't have their common operating pictures as well advanced. So
That's a very good point. Yeah, thank you very much, Deb.
And it's the important ability with the technologies, and sorry just to jump in, Sergio, there, but just on Deb's point there, it's the ability for people who are making decisions. So it could be the combat agency, but also the emergency management people who are supporting the combat agency to have access to that same information, so that the decisions being made are across that. If you want to look at the EM sphere, that all agency, all hazards approach. When a certain group or a certain organisation gets funding, it becomes siloed, and it isn't spread across, and access isn't spread across the common sphere, and it can become problematic. I feel that it just needs to. We need to break down the silos and just develop a one size fits all, so that we can all see it, we can all deal with it, we can all make the decisions that we need to. And I forgot to mention, and Deb mentioned it as well, is that it's the aftermath and that recovery side of things where information is important. When you're looking at building impact assessments, whether it be flood or fire or a storm, is the ability to have the information from the combat agency transposed over to the Emergency Operations Centre group of people that are now starting to develop that recovery process. What is needed so that we can get the right resources to our communities and our residents to give them the best opportunity to restore a new normality as quickly as possible.
Yeah, no, that's great. I mean, that's in a sense is a point with this, right? Try to find that commonality in what we understand by resilience and how the two different areas can actually help each other with a common dual use of technologies or platforms, right? So that's basically the ultimate goal, to make Australia a resilient country, whatever the resilient word means to each of us, right? So no, that's great. So Jacinth, Nick, Oscar, any of you want to actually jump on the questions about the actual?
Could I make a couple of points, Sergio?
Oh, David, yeah.
Okay, just this is really in response to Deb's point. The Defence Strategic Review 2023, which was issued by the government about 6 months ago, specifically makes the point that the Australian Defence Force has to be disengaged from domestic natural disasters, not disengaged, sorry, that they should not be the primary responder to in domestic natural disasters because they have various external threats that they need to be focusing on. And I think the development of a national common operating picture is really a key part of that. Much of the focus is, okay, well, if we don't have the army out there fighting bushfires, who do we get to fight the bushfires? But actually, stepping back, the key enabler of all of that is the development of a national common operating picture for bushfires or whatever other natural disasters are taking place. So I think that's a key. If you're looking for ways to, raise the necessity of this, I think that would be a key point, that we have to use these resources which are currently focused on national defence for national resilience, and part of that is the development of a national common operating picture. So that's one point. The second point is that my work around the region, mostly with developing countries, partners to Australia, involves helping them develop their maritime domain awareness, again, a common operating picture, as a way of really assisting and supporting Australia's own national security. But the point I want to make is that in working with these countries, traditionally MDA was arrived at through spending large amounts of money on military-grade technology, whether it be major huge satellites, etc., or various other sensors. But much of my work with these countries involves using commercial tools, web-based platforms to achieve very similar results to the military-grade infrastructure at a tiny fraction of the cost. So again, those lessons in being able to avoid that sort of military-style costs can be very relevant to thinking about developing a common operating picture in Australia.
That was great. So Nick, Justin, Oscar, anything to add from that angle?
Yeah, I might jump in. So yeah, building on that point, I suppose the reflection I'd make from the get-go, and stating the obvious perhaps, but not for perhaps people who aren't in defence, but it's been the case for some time that key capabilities and developments technology are no longer, if they ever were, just inside the tent, as we like to say. We absolutely depend on innovation that's occurring outside of defence and niche capabilities. And so I would concur with the previous speaker that any way in which we can seek to exploit commercially available technology to provide access to technology far more quickly and more cheaply is something not only, I suggest, of interest to non-defence players, but also something of interest to defence as it looks to do as much as it can within the budget we've got. So comment I'd like to make, though, about sensors specifically, and I'm not from Home Affairs, so put that caveat there, but we partner with Home Affairs quite a bit. Many of you would be aware of the Security of Critical Infrastructure Act and the role that Act, combined with Home Affairs leadership in that space, in seeking to mobilise critical infrastructure sectors across Australia in uplifting their protective security postures, part of which is around things like supply chain security, security of their workforce, information security, cybersecurity, and with all the things I've just mentioned, also just understanding what's going on for their particular business and with all the sensor inputs that they might therefore depend on in order to understand what their posture is. So that explosion of sensors that we're seeing and will continue to see is of great interest to critical infrastructure providers and also of great interest to defence from a science to technology perspective. And really understanding, as you've foreshadowed for this entire presentation, not only the opportunity space, but also the increasing vulnerability is associated with massive proliferation of endpoints that can be exploited by adversaries who may wish to create havoc. So really keen to understand holistic approaches to not only exploiting sensor capabilities, but also ensuring that as much as possible that they maintain a certain resilience, robustness to threats that we can likely anticipate moving forward. Thanks.
Oh, that's great. That's great, and it's a common aim for both areas. So now that's good segue to a bit more technology part. But before that, I would like to ask Oscar if he has anything to add to this larger picture.
Yeah, I think just to echo Justin's point, and in a lot of ways Philip's points as well around that ability to integrate all of these networks. What's really important, and I think kind of foundational to frame for people who come from different sectors, is there's really clear legislation around which data can and can't go different places when you're talking about the intelligence community, when you're talking about defence, and when you're talking about the systems that are built. So being able to design sensors, platforms that, to Justin's point, can articulate resilience from the outset, that can show where sensor feeds originated, where they've come from, and then enabling systems that can manage who gets what at different points in time based upon their need, rather than the situation we often find ourselves in, which that functionality has never been thought of. So as a result, you just lose access to any component is really critical at the really early design stages. And so any COP that may or may not eventuate is capable of having the requisite data at the time it needs it, whilst also protecting the policy and the legislation that we, particularly from a national security community, expect of those people in all of their operations, and particularly that sort of area. What we have seen, the sector is fantastic at building exquisite sensors, but where we then break down is how those sensor feeds are distributed across. So also being able to delineate between those factors and what can go directly to an effector, where can you create a link where that can naturally occur, by contrast to where do we know and where do we believe that there will always have to be a human in the loop. And so we can disambiguate those two parts of the sector rather than sort of treating them all as one unified thing, which particularly from the defence and national security side, that they're not. So that's sort of, there are 1,000 different areas that we can go down, but from the foundational thinking, I think that's something that's really important to bear in mind. And particularly, as sort of Justin spoke to, that will be true from Home Affairs through to AFP, through to the 4-letter agencies that have particular intelligence mandates, through all points in time, and defence more broadly. Sorry, Deb.
I'm just going to reiterate that point, and it goes the other way in terms of agency collected data. Feeding that up to a Commonwealth common operating picture is also fraught with all sorts of issues around data agreements. So it goes both ways. Yeah.
Yeah, look at that. That's
sorry.
great. Sorry, Oscar. Not carry on. That's great. But one of the things that actually could be on the table here is to implement some sort of policy, CRC. It's part of the research programs too, right? Our idea. I think that is clear from this conversation that will be one of the topics to be looking into. Sorry, Oscar.
I was just going to echo kind of, Deb's point at its core and sort of articulate that no matter where this goes, if you can, these things are very hard to retroactively build into technologies, but if you build them from the outset, understanding what are the current constraints, it also becomes a very powerful tool to say to stakeholders in government, these are the things that would need to change for us to have the capability that you're requesting of us to have. And that's where I think entities like a CRC such as this would be really impactful in actually influencing that policy discussion. So I'll hand across to Nick, who's got his hand up.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Yeah, I think one of the things that's clear is that there's a big play space here, right, and lots of things to consider, and your mind almost boggles as you stack up the challenges, right from the sensing at the edge to the sense making at the other side, and then the two-way communications to inform the edge, right? And I would encourage the approach and the manner that we're going about in defence is to take minimum viable product and minimum viable capability approach. So how can we develop this down? How can we take chunks of the elephant and describe them as minimum viable products where there are significant overlaps across all the stakeholder groups, and then we can have those really tight research questions that develop capability in and of themselves and go into a bigger part of the whole, but aren't relying on codependencies with all the other elements in order to reach success. So that's it. That would be what I would encourage to do that.
That's great, Nick. You are basically doing my job. Thank you very much, because you are giving me a perfect highway to Sarah, which actually raised the hand, and Mark, because this would had to be driven by the industry, right? Let's remember that it's a CRC, so it would be interesting to know a bit more from the industry perspective, what is actually working, what is not working, what is needed, what is actually the needs that they have been unmet there. So, Sarah.
Yeah, thanks, Sergio, and thanks for the invite today. It's really exciting to see so many people here from such a diverse range of disciplines and organisations. So having done a lot of work, particularly recently over the last 5 or 6 years, looking at sensor technologies in the military context, but particularly for dismounted soldiers and sort of really at the edge. So many things resonate that we've said. I think, as you've said at the beginning here, getting information to the right people at the right time. Of course, that's what you need to do in that battlefield situation as well. That real time, the importance. So that communication in real time that both Philip and Deb mentioned is sort of critical. I've actually got a personal link as well in terms of my husband's very involved with the RFS, so that's a real part of our personal life. So getting some of the technologies that we use for military into defence, getting that in use in emergency services or accelerating those uses both for defence and for those organisations is sort of really close to my heart as well. I just wanted to, we mentioned maybe some of those technologies. So, I think you can't go past unmanned systems, and the impact that's had both in the military context, but also the potential that it has for dual use in many other areas, whether aerial, land or sea, whether it's in mining, mining or agriculture. There's many applications. And obviously in those emergency services as well. The sensing aspects, so obviously having sensors from our perspective, delivering sensors which can provide that situational awareness, whether it's sort of detecting, recognising, identifying, using AI for classifying items. We've seen those used in previous organisations that I've worked for, search and rescue. So those facial, using thermal cameras to find people, to be able to facially, even recognise individuals. The other parts of sensors that are important for that are position navigation, timing technologies. Whether it be inertial sensors, gyroscopes, there's one thing that's been mentioned a couple of times is going to those lower cost solutions, and obviously drones, we've seen those lower cost drones being used more and more. I think an important aspect just to touch on there is that the ability for those drones to be interfered with. So we produce in our SAFRAN a lot of interference detection mitigation technologies. There's no reason why they couldn't necessarily be used in an emergency services context as well, but that's an important thing when we're buying commercial off-the-shelf products that we need to bear in mind, is that they can be jammed, they can be spoofed. Those sensing technologies become very important, not only when you lose your GPS because they've been jammed or spoofed, but also when you're underwater, underground, then you can't actually receive those GPSs as well. So this is such a big topic area, and those supporting technologies that we've mentioned already in terms of communications, technologies to allow low size, weight and power. So power obviously becomes quite an issue when we're talking about autonomous systems. But there's a lot of opportunity here for technologies which are already in research, in R&D, to be matured. And if we can accelerate that with something like a CRC, that's just fabulous. Can't wait to see that happen.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Sarah. That's a great insight. So, Philip, you got your hands up.
Just very quickly, just loving hearing all the talk and everything like that from, as I said, I feel very out of my depth here. But one thing when we're doing and having discussions about this and we're talking about technologies and the capability of sharing information, and sort of Sarah reminded me of something, is that we need to be able to have the ability that if we're going to use these technologies and capabilities, we need to be able to look at having it getting out into the people in the field, into all the areas that they work, so that they can actually receive that live and or up-to-date information to help with the decisions they're making, but also for them to get the information back into incident management teams or emergency operations centres that are set up, so that the planning that's being developed corresponds to what's actually happening out in the field. And a lot of times in my experience in the RFS world is that plans are made, plans are put together, but because they're done in a time frame that hasn't got access to up-to-date and live information straight away, they're out of date basically as the signature and the approval part is put on the bottom of the page. So that ability to to get information from the field and really good information from the field, rather than relying on radio communications and things like that. Drones are fantastic. A picture is worth 1,000 words and all that kind of stuff. It's just that ability to have the information highway developed. It's no good having all this technology if we can't get it moving out to where we need to get it.
No,
Thank you.
that's perfect. Thank you so much. Sarah? You're mute, Sarah.
That information, as you talk about the information from sensors, that we suddenly go into this kind of, it's a bit of a catchphrase, but that kind of big data scenario. So that one of those enabling technologies as well is processing at that edge. So being able to get the key bits of information distilled from those sensors right at that edge, so that you can just pass back just those one or two key bits of information. Because quickly you lose like bandwidth, and so that's one of the limiting factors as well. So another enabling technology is being able to have that AI processing and also edge computing.
Oh, fantastic. So I would like to actually direct a quick question to Mark on the technology front. I'm familiar with your company, and I know that dual use is something that you guys are doing already. So how that, from the industry point of view, that dual use composite sensing technology will actually be able to be helped by a CRC of this type? You're mute.
That'll work. Okay, yeah. So in terms of the discussion so far about being a sort of a front end technology, and particularly for dynamic environments, so the formulation and operation of the COP, apart from being and potentially an element of that is not really within our purview, but in terms of and going back to the original question about communications, clearly as a front-end technology, the communications capability to be able to get the information to and from and back into the field from any of the front-end sensors is critical. In terms of composite sensing, so that being able to build a multi-dimensional picture of any environment could be of great use, and allow sort of particularly from the point of view of any pre-processing by an AI or other technologies on that sort of multi-dimensional picture can paint a much richer outcome for the users.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Mark. So I feel that we're running out of time and we're barely scratching the surface now. It's like when you're having the coffee and you need to go before time and you're starting to feel comfortable. But basically, I would like to see if Laura, had you seen any questions on the chat that we can actually open a little bit to the floor? If any questions from the audience.
Yes. So Peter Morrissey from Hunter, from the Hunter region, has asked, how important should an Australian satellite industry be for this resilience?
Good, Oscar.
Yeah, happy to at least throw one perspective on there. So sovereign space capability received a whole lot of focus for a period of time over the last sort of 3 years. It's really important to have the capacity, so long as it isn't at the detriment of the actual technology that we can leverage off of our partners and off of the commercial sector. So what I would say is there's been a lot of focus on generating sort of end-to-end space capabilities in a sovereign perspective, whereas what we've seen is that has taken away a range of specialists who are now focused on areas that might already exist in a really comprehensive manner through our allies and our partners. And just, I think it is important to have the capacity and to have the connections to do so, but defining, and this came up in the most recent ASCA RFI, what does sovereign mean? Does sovereign mean we have the strength in networks to generate something through assured supply chains? Or does sovereign mean we have everything in a domestic context to produce it? So it's important to have that capacity, so long as sovereign means that we're leveraging an assured supply chain, vice it means that we're trying to recreate capabilities that already exist at scale and at a very high technical proficiency in our allies and in our closest allies.
That's great. Thank you very much, Oscar. Any more questions from the audience?
I mean, Deb already mentioned about Arno's question, but so just so you know the full extent of it, it is, will DSTG be a research participant in this CRC? We are definitely exploring, who will be the partners in this CRC, and, we won't even be kind of pursuing those as locked in conversations until probably sometime early next year. So that's very much an exploration, and exactly like Oscar's just mentioned around what is sovereign, what does sovereign mean? These are all conversations we need to be having to understand who are the right partners for the CRC, and where do those key players need to be involved, to make sure that we're creating that impact that we're all hoping for, that the conversation here has revolved around. So, but Anna's actual comment is there is an imbalance between the funding available for defence requirements versus that available to volunteer-based organisations such as the RFS, SES, as well as councils for disaster detection and management. How will the CRC address this imbalance, in particular with the likelihood of more frequent natural incidents? Does anybody want to?
Any brave member of the panel?
Maybe we'll respond to, but.
Hi, can I have one question?
Oh, sure, David.
Yep. Hi, Laura. Hi, everyone. So basically, my company have a strong experience to work with the research institution, and we did support one CRC before, so we have experience about that. And also, we are having and implementing the edge computing technology with AI, and also doing the big data as well. So basically, we understand this, like critical of sharing the data to who and what level and when and how long. So all of that thing we have experience. The question I want to ask regarding this CRC is like, do we have some sort of mechanism to actually give industry partner, some company like us, the opportunity to showcase the technology to prove that before the government funding our CRC, they really know that it's actually something definitely will work and have the real solution on the ground to make the impact. That is one thing I want to ask. And also from the experience we have with the previous CRC, I don't see the money invest into CRCs make the impact, rather than they have a lot of management board change every year, which is like really the thing people talk a lot about CRC now, and they probably want to see some sort of a review about that and how to give the government more confidence to invest into CRC and actually have the impact. So that is my point. Yeah.
Great. Thanks so much, David. Yeah, we're definitely wanting the CRC to have the impact that Australia needs, and so that's why we're taking our time and applying in the round 26. So applications March 2025. I just want to make use of our panel while they're here. We've only got a couple of minutes left. So I think Phil, you had your hand up first. Philip. Yep.
Thanks, Waz. Really enjoyed the opportunity to be with you. Just Sergio, one of the things that you mentioned, and it's a passion of mine, and I can see that the work you're going to do is going to be fantastic in supplying good real-time stuff for not only the decision makers, but something I'd like you to take into account is that with what we're building, what we're discussing, you mentioned making a resilient country. Happy days, I think that's great. But what I'd like to do is build the technology and everything into place where we're not building a reliant community. See, a lot of people now sit and wait for information to come out of combat agencies about what's going on, and they'll make their decisions based on that information. What I'd like to be able to produce and have a thought process, and I'm happy to be wrong, is that something that there is built that the community has access to so that they can actually make the decisions they need to make in the right time for them to be safe. So that we're not heavily relying on combat agencies who need to deal with the situation in front of them, is that our communities have information and technology at their fingertips that they can make the right decisions at the right time. And an example of that is that, you know, the poor SES people will have to go and knock on people's doors with a day like we've got in Sydney, which is nice and sunny and warm and everything like that, and say in 3 days' time, you're going to have water up to your roof level. If people have the information, they can get the verbal information then, but then can go and check and look at it and go 100% right, this is what's going to go, this is what could happen to me. I need to make decisions now to make myself safe. Thank you for the opportunity.
That's a great point, and that's part of some of the areas that we're touching on, discussing about human-centric and also community, not community science, but more like a community sense on fusion, right? In which people got the information they need on their hand, because sometimes they are the first responders, right? That's a reality. The reality, the people surrounding the emergency threats is where they will be responding first, apart from the combat agencies, right? So yeah, no, indeed, very good point. So I'd like to give, in the interest of time, I think we got one couple of minutes more. I think Deb is actually wanted to talk for a few minutes. So Deb.
Oh, sure. I'm always happy to take the floor. It was in response to David's point about testing and trialing the sensor technology, and so I was going to make a point at some point about agencies always have in the back of their mind what's going to happen if we use this technology and we go to a coronial inquest. How can we defend the use of this technology? So, yeah, testing and trialling is an important part of it. The Office of the Chief Scientist, their Bushfire Research and Development, New South Wales, can't remember the exact name, and apparently it's now defunct, but there's a number of organisations that have been funded through that have been using a place in Queensland called the Noosa Peregian Beach Digital Hub, and through an organisation called FireTech. So we're hoping that we can leverage some more testing and trialling in that facility, especially with, say, the XPRIZE. And if you don't know what XPRIZE is, look it up, XPRIZE. So they've got some stuff going on around millions of dollars towards, bushfire detection. And then my final point is it's more of a challenge, really. So I've just heard a number of people use the term unmanned, and we spend a lot of time going around saying it's uncrewed. I know we've got to fight the US on that because they're well entrenched with the unmanned, but Australia is definitely moving towards the use of uncrewed in their terminology. So.
Great. I think that I'm going to leave the last one for Justin, and then we probably need to wrap up because we're actually over time. Thank you, Jess. Thank you, Deb. Justin?
Yeah, a quick comment. I had the opportunity in my role to interact with US stakeholders, and in the US government, they're moving towards a new standard around name convention, uninhabited X system, X referring to particular domains. So even in the US, where it's been very sticky, they're moving away from a much more gender neutral, more meaningful description of such systems. So just for people's awareness. And the other thing I wanted to flag is that there are, from a defence perspective, there's so much we can learn from first responders, from critical infrastructure partners, from people who use these technologies and plan on using them in the future, and would love to continue the conversation about what we might work on together. And as a bit of a thought bubble, no commitment from my part, but exploring this idea of what might we do to prepare Australia to be resilient for something like the Brisbane Olympics in 2032. What might that look like? Question mark. Thanks.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. And I can only thank you all for your time. I think it's always very precious to have the people's time, especially you're all very busy. So thank you so much. And we'll be in contact over the next